Hey, hey, my financially intentional people. I'm back from my vacation and couldn't be more thrilled than to be joined by someone who I've admired from afar for so long, Miss Jillian Johnsrud. She is just an amazing person, and I just really selfishly wanted to have her on the podcast because I'm fascinated by her and she has an amazing story, but she also has an amazing platform called Retire Often. She has her own podcast and she talks about retiring often. But you'll see, she's just a fascinating person with a fascinating story that could teach you so many things. She's taught me so many things she doesn't even know, but I'll let you see for yourself. So, hey, Jillian.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Of course. Like I said, I'm super excited to have you because I just want to talk to you because I'm just fangirl over here. But it is a personal finance podcast. So I just want to know what I don't know is kind of what was your initial introduction into the personal finance space?
So, two-part, I guess.
Hmm.
One, my interest in money actually started when I was probably in junior high. My mom was in a really unhealthy relationship, and I came to her and I said, "Listen, this isn't good. This isn't healthy. This isn't safe. Like, we have to leave." And I don't care. I don't care where we go. I don't care what we do. I don't care where we live, but this isn't working. And she's a very practical woman and just said, "Listen, Jillian, I can't afford to raise three kids on my own. So we don't have a choice." I went
Mm.
upstairs and I just cried hot tears into my pillow because I felt so hopeless. But at the same time, had this epiphany of, oh, if we had more money, we would have some options here. We would have some choices.
Mm.
Money gives us options and choices. And in that moment, I desperately wanted more options and more choices. I never wanted to feel stuck someplace unhealthy or unsafe. And so I just started kind of squirreling money away, working, saving. Growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. So it was challenging. I think anyone who grew up kind of feeling poor might be able to relate in that when you feel poor, you really don't want to look poor. You really don't want that to be part of your identity. And so there was this huge temptation for me of, I have this little bit of money, I could spend it so I don't look poor and to ease that discomfort. But me and my husband, we never had high earning careers. And so as adults, we really had to grapple with this. We're not going to earn enough money to, to become rich and to look rich. It's one or the other. We don't make enough money for both.
Yes.
And so it was really
Yes.
prioritizing that freedom and that security over the discomfort of maybe people's assumptions.
Wow. That is very interesting. But what's even more interesting is that you and your husband kind of were on the same page because I find that oftentimes one person might want to, for example, look rich and the other person just really wants to like actually build wealth and be rich. And those two things are what happens in relationships and why people there's financial infidelity and people that's the number one people number one reason why people break up and all of those kind of things. So it's great that you guys were on the same page.
Don't know if we were on the same page when we met. Um, because my husband had a very different background. He had this really
Hmm.
kind of comfortable, cozy middle class lifestyle where he had two professional working parents and they went out to eat a lot. And his mom bought lots of clothes and had her nails done. And there was like all of these small comforts, which felt really normal to him and felt extravagantly extreme to me. And so we came in and I thought, oh my gosh, if we go to the dollar movie theater and we like sneak in our dollar candy from the dollar store, this is a big thing. This is a big financial purchase. And from his perspective, we were being like ultra frugal. And so,
Let's just
like, our
buy the $10 popcorn.
baseline,
What's the problem?
yeah, our baseline was super different. And
Yeah.
so it was a lot of conversations about why is this important to me? What's this vision of the life I want us to have? And how do we financially get there? What's important to us? What do we care about? Where do we want to go as a couple and eventually as a family? So therefore, what steps do we need to take to make that happen?
Hmm.
We really had to kind of recenter ourselves a lot to get onto the same page.
Yes, but you work through that process, which
Yeah.
again is something that people just don't often do, right? So you establish a framework to build and grow from within your relationship that eventually turned into, some of the things that I believe that you share with others to do now. So from that point of being a kid to now transitioning into your own relationship, what are some of the things that you had to learn about money that has shaped how you deal with money now?
I had to learn everything about money. Like we weren't a family that shared finances. We kind of had this culture of finances were something to avoid. They were something to hide from. It was like try to create as much emotional distance from our money and what was happening from our money as possible was kind of the vibe I was picking up. And it was funny. So the second kind of financial lesson or like introduction to finance for me was I was like 18, 19. Adam and I had just been married and I was with a family member. I think we were walking through like a Christian bookstore or something. And I saw this little book about finances and it was very expensive. This was 20 years ago and this book was like $18, which to me, gosh, with inflation, that's like a $40 book. It's really, it was a huge amount of money. And I
Yeah.
never read a personal finance book. I grew up before the internet. We lived in a small town. There was no public library. I just didn't have access to this kind of information. And I remember I was just really struggling with, do I spend this much money? It seems like it could be really helpful. And this family member said, oh, honey, don't waste your money on that. So and so in the family can teach you everything you need to know about money. And in that moment, I thought, I know so and so, and there's no way in hell that's happening. Uh, they have never taught me a thing about money. And I instantly was like, yes, I'm buying the book. This is my only shot.
We don't want to be like them. That's not who we want to take advice from. No, thank you. I'll pass. Whatever is in this book has to be better. That is hilarious. That is hilarious. So, did you end up like learning anything from that book that you bought?
It was a really basic introduction to budgeting, an
Hmm.
emergency fund, starting to invest, but it got me curious. And so I started going to the library. We moved to DC. It was my husband's first duty assignment with the military. So there was a big public library and I started checking out. I read a book every week and I just read about all these different topics
Nice.
and I read all these different financial books and we started paying off our debt. We started with $55,000 of debt and we started
Hmm.
paying all of that off. I know it was, well, part of this was on my husband. So when I met him, he had $35,000 of student loans. And because he was used to this very middle class lifestyle, but was making no money, he also had $10,000 of credit card debt. Because there again, he thought, I'm not going to Applebee's. I'm going to Jack in the Box. I'm making good financial choices here. Despite
Listen.
the fact he didn't have the money to go to Jack in the Box. And unbeknownst to me at the time, I actually had $10,000 of medical debt from when I was in high school.
Mm.
It was in my name. I thought had been paid
Mm.
off. It had not been paid off. And it was a couple years in that I got a letter from a creditor like, oh, by the way, you owe us 10 grand, which was,
What?
it was
Wait,
really,
wait. I don't understand that. How can a
mm,
minor
mhm.
accumulate debt?
I just turned 18. So my birthday's January
Oh.
3rd. So middle of my senior year, I checked into the hospital like, I don't know, January 10th, signed myself in, signed all of the paperwork, and that was mine. That was my debt. So I found out about that a few years in, and it was like super discouraging to be like, oh, I thought, well, we're trying to do everything right, we're making good progress, and then life is surprise. You get a setback.
Oh my God. I definitely I'm going to talk about you paying off this $55,000 in debt, but I just want to put in there as far as medical debt coming from somebody who used to forgive medical debt as a hospital administrator. Okay, that's one of the things that really gets people in a pickle. So, instead of paying off that $10,000, and I don't even know how you paid it off, at that point you could have went to the hospital and been like, you know what, I was 18, I had just turned 18, can you just forgive this debt? And usually they have, if they're a nonprofit or anything, or a religious hospital, they usually have some kind of charity fund that they'll just pull from. So a lot of people are just so scared to ask, or the debt is so intimidating, they'll just kind of forget about it. But that's one way to deal with it. But
And we
you
did,
did pay off the $55,000 of
well, we
debt.
did
Yeah.
negotiate this a lot because
Uh-huh.
I called the
Uh-huh.
hospital. I was like, I never got a bill. This is the first time, and this is 4 years later, no one called, no one sent anything. And they were like, well, now it's with the collector. And so there's nothing we can do. I'm like, call them up, take it back, make it yours again.
Yes.
And they're like, well, there would have been this like scholarship fund, but now it's too late. And I'm like, no, no, no. We need some options. So we did
Mm-hmm.
work out kind of a payment plan where they forgave half of it
Mm-hmm.
if we paid like 2,000 up front and then $500 a month payments. So we were able to knock it down to 5,000, but I was kind of like, this is a little janky
It
because I'm in high school and you never send a bill.
it is
We're four
janky, but
years later.
imagine how many people get caught up like that, and it ruins them financially. Like, you starting off your life with that debt, and it just followed you. So that's crazy. But at least you paid that off, and then so you were reading these financial books, and you paid off all this debt. Like, what did that look like?
So
The rest of it.
one of the big
Sorry.
things was my husband decided to join the military.
Mm,
Because in exchange for that, they would pay off that debt over 3 years. They would pay off his student loans.
mm,
And the little bonus he got, I think it was 7 or 8,000, plus the 6 months that he was away training, all of the income from that, like we could use that to pay off the 10 grand in credit card debt. You know what? I've been reflecting on it a lot this week. There's a lot of things in my life and my story that when you zoom out and in retrospect look impressive or successful or inspiring. Let me tell you, in the moment, nobody
listen.
thought that. Nobody said that. Everyone thought like we were trading our souls to the devil for debt payment relief. Because I told all our friends,
Right.
because all of our friends had student loan debt. I was like, guys, here's a great opportunity. You could do this. And they're like, pass. No,
Our
thank you.
pass,
Like,
yes.
and it's funny now because I can look back and say all these things were super helpful. And people were like, yeah, that's amazing. In the moment, nobody thought that. They thought it was lame. They thought it was boring. They thought it was
Mhm.
hard.
Mhm.
It did not look glamorous.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people think, especially like if you just took away everything else that you've accomplished. They're like, "Oh, I paid off $55,000 in a couple of years." They're like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. How did you have the foresight to do it?" And you're like, I was in the middle of this struggling, and like in the back end, that's the same thing with me. I'm like, I was just doing it, and then in the back end is when I looked and was like, oh, I really did do that. That was really smart. And I can probably break it down to you, but let me tell you, going through it, it did not seem like either I was going to hit this goal or it just didn't feel like I was doing this amazing thing.
Yeah. Yeah. There is
Yeah.
no affirmation. There is no encouragement in the beginning, especially, but even in the middle of the journey. And like, I say that to encourage people. If you're like pushing through and figuring stuff out and nobody around you gets what you're doing or why you're doing it, and they don't see the result yet, because you don't have the result yet, doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. It
Yes.
just means like they don't have the vision that you have for what you want your life to be. And it's fine. That vision wasn't given to them. That vision was given to you. It's yours to work it out.
Yes.
But it can
Yes.
be tough. It can be tough at first when you don't got the results to show off yet.
Right. Right. I love it. I love it. So let's talk about this concept of retiring often. What exactly does that mean to you?
Yeah, when we first started this journey, we had all this debt. Neither my husband or I decided to go into high earning professions. It's just for a lot of reasons, a lot of kind of old stories that I had internalized of if I wanted to be in a helping profession, you were always going to be poor. You were always going to be broke. You can make money or you can be a good person and help people, but you can't do both. And growing up, I still don't. I didn't have like crazy self-esteem in that I thought I was like the best or the brightest or the most successful. Like I wasn't like, yes, I'm destined to be a millionaire. I was like, I'm just going to try to pay the bills. Like that's my goal in life, is to not drown in debt and maybe have an emergency fund. So when we started, my initial like super ambitious goal was maybe we can be financially independent and able to retire when we're like 60. I had seen my husband's parents in their 60s, their health had sharply declined. They weren't able to keep working and they weren't quite financially prepared for retirement yet. And it was like big struggle. And I was like, man, I don't want to do that. So let's try to hit 5 by 60. Never. I ended up doing it by 32. 0% chance. If I
Yes.
went back in time, I could even convince my own self that that was a possibility. Like, I grew up in kind of this vibe where hope is dangerous. Hope is a risk. Hope is for the foolish. You have to be practical. So my alternative, I wasn't going to retire early. I'm going to make a lot of money, but we're always going to be like borderline poor in my head, was if we don't want to miss out on the best that life has to offer, if we don't want to miss out on these like amazing moments and opportunities, we're going to have to do mini retirements. We're going to have to find a month or 2 months or 3 months, like, because in my mind, we're never going to get there fast, but I can't postpone everything until I'm 60 either. So this idea of retiring often, what if we could just do this frequently? What if we could take these little career breaks to really focus on the stuff that we care about? And that seemed much more possible and realistic.
I mean, was that modeled for you in some kind of way, or that was just what made sense for you at that time?
Um, so like the young kids do. I was reading the Old Testament when I was 19. That's all the
Like the
cool
young
kids
kids, just
are.
the whole
I'm
book. Yeah. Yes.
working my way through. Um, but I came across, the idea of like a sabbatical year. And every 7 years, the Jews would take a year up. And I'm like, that's brilliant. And so I go to my husband and I'm like, hey, we should totally do that. And he was like, oh, honey, I don't think people do that anymore. Actually, I'm not 100% sure they ever did that. Like, it was like a cool idea, but I don't know if like historically it happened. And I was like, no, but like, what if we just like save a bit more? And what if we do all these, like, what if we could take a year off every 7 years or half a year or something? And he had like all these legitimate questions of how that would happen. And I had none of the answers at that point, but I was always in the like, but maybe, what if we could? Like, what if we just kind of start walking action and we see what happens? And so that was probably like 3 months after we got married, like a real early conversation, but it set us on this trajectory.
Wow, I love that. And I love that it came from the Bible because, like everybody just
OT.
reads it and just comes, like with these financial concepts, like, yes. Um, of these mini retirements. And then how long after you got married were you able to take your first mini retirement?
So the first one, I would say, was 4 years in, maybe.
Mm.
We, at that point, like, we had paid off our debt. We'd saved our emergency fund. We were just starting to invest. So we were like really early in our financial journey. We were kind of in that like head above water, navigating like now wealth building side. And it was an unplanned mini retirement. So there are planned mini retirements. And then there's ones that life kind of offers up. And this for me came in the form of a miscarriage.
Mm.
Some people, it's like a blip and they're like, oh, that's sad. And we'll try again. It imploded my internal life
Mm.
because I was a one trick pony, and my trick was I won't feel this and I won't acknowledge this pain and I won't acknowledge trauma. I'll just push it down and I'll move past. And that trick had served me really well throughout my childhood and my early 20s. And then this happened and the trick worked. And a
Mm.
whole lifetime of trauma and pain poured out of me. And my employer at the time was like, we do not know what to do with this girl. She is a mess. She could not pull it together. And so they said, we'll pay for a month off. Just leave, go away, figure this crap out, come back fixed. Please go figure, like, come back to work as like a normal human being. And that's what I did. Me and my best friend, we got in my Honda Civic and we took a road trip from DC to Seattle and back for a month.
Wow.
We stayed with friends and family and national parks, state parks, and tents and frozen ground and hurricane kind of wind. Like, we did the whole thing and it was 100% what I needed. Like, I just needed that time to actually feel my feelings instead of avoid my feelings and to process that, yeah, sometimes sucky things happen even when you're trying your best.
Wow. Wow, it's amazing that you took that time off. So did you only take that month and then went back to work, or did you take
Yeah.
longer? Okay.
But it
And your husband was like, "Go,
reaffirmed.
girl."
Yeah. He also was like, I don't know how to help this at all. Totally out of his depth. But it reaffirmed that confidence of, oh, many retirements can be life-changing. They can be transformative. Like,
Yeah.
they can give you access to this time and this space for personal growth, for healing. And you come back changed. And that change continues to unfold because you're on a new trajectory now. And the thing is, like, you can pick these mini retirements. You can do it for a lot of different reasons. They can have a lot of different focuses. You can accomplish a whole bunch of different kinds of things versus, like, I'll deal with that when I'm 65, retire then, and hope it all works out.
Do you even with the mini retirements built in, do you have like this goal where you're just like, that's the end point, like I'm not stopping. I'm just a hard stop from when I'm not gonna work, period. Like, do you have that retirement age now?
No, when we became 32, it was, so I think the kind of cultural narrative and expectation is, how much can you handle? How much of this work burden can you carry and keep moving forward and, like, hope that it doesn't hurt your personal life? My perspective shifted. What could I add in? What professional things could I include that would improve or benefit my personal life?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is there an amount or a type of work that actually improves me, my mental health, my physical health across the board? My model and my inspiration is, like, I want to be like Betty White. Just want to do the work I love, and I want to do it in the amount that works for me, in the type that works for me, but, like, forever. I want to be like a 95-year-old rock star where, like,
That's
people have
right.
appreciated my work for 70 years and I
Love
still get to
it.
show up and, like, do cool things with cool people.
Like, share.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that's amazing. And people ask me that too. Even though I haven't hit fire, I don't necessarily look at it as a point of like that destination. Like, I'm going to stop. I'm a labor and delivery nurse. I
Yep.
love what I do. No matter what other things that I do on the side, I love going in, seeing Miracle of Life every
Yeah.
day, right? And so I'm just like, as long as I have the capacity to retire often, I don't ever think that I'll fire. Wanted to ask you if you felt the same way, because that's exactly how I feel too. Like, if you build a life work that you're passionate about, then you don't have to retire from that, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. But I kind of want to back up a little bit because you said at 32 you guys reached fire. And was that like your traditional 25 times, 20 times amount, your annual expenses in savings and investment? Was it the traditional like fire? You hit that fire number at the
Oh, yes and no. We had kind of a
okay.
three-leg stool. So no, in that all of our assets weren't in like a 401k. Um,
Okay.
we had enough income from our investments to cover all of our bills indefinitely. But that was a
Hmm.
mix of retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, cash. We had two rental properties at that time, which were so the investments were about 30%. The retirement accounts were about 30%. And my husband was medically retired from the military. And so that
Hmm.
covered our health insurance and
Mm.
about 30%. And it wasn't actually, we didn't have like this massive net worth. We had pretty much a guaranteed like $3,500 a month income, but our health insurance was paid for. We didn't have any car debts. We didn't have any student loans. We had paid cash for our house, we fixed up our house. Like we had a little camper. We have 5 kids, $1,000 a month on
I
food.
was
Like that's a
getting
big
to that.
chunk.
Like,
Um,
yes.
but there
Yes.
weren't a ton of other expenses. Like we had a cheap cell phone plan, we had a couple $100 a month of bills. We didn't, when we hit 5, we decided to take a year-long mini retirement, both of us together, which was the first time we had done that. In our
Mm.
journey before, we had never both been off for like a significant amount of time. But I wasn't like, and we're done forever. I said, we need a year off. And then you know what? I know we have enough money for a year off. And then we'll see. I don't need the security of I never I never want to be able or have to go back to work. And I know that a lot of people feel that for reasons, but there were a lot of jobs we liked. There was a lot of work that we enjoyed. And honestly, we weren't making a lot of money. So, like, in some ways, it's a blessing in that there was a whole bunch of different kinds of jobs that could replace the income we were making before because we weren't making that much. So, like,
Mhm.
honestly, if I went to go work at a garden finance, like, that would have been enough. Like, if I would have worked at the cop shop, like, that would have been enough. I could have put houses and been self-employed. Like, that would have been enough. Um, there was a whole bunch of different options. So I wasn't worried about that, but I did know we needed a year off, like, bad. So
Mm.
we would take that year off and then we would go from there.
And like a lot of people could see this story like, okay, but it's just like you and your husband, you guys were making a dual income, but you're doing this with 5 kids at this point
Mm-hmm.
too. Like, I just want people to understand what's possible because a lot of people make excuses like, oh, well, I couldn't do that because of X, Y, and Z. No, you can. You do it. And oftentimes we do it in spite of all these things, not, because we can't because of these things. So I love that. And I like to mention that because, like, it did kind of sound like it's just you and your husband for a little. I was like, no,
Oh
there's
no,
kids in the
there's a
mix here.
whole group of kids here. Um, well, and that was a big motivation to become financially independent. One, it's like my trauma background, and it was my mental health. But the other is we wanted to adopt kids. We wanted to be able to adopt kids with special needs, and they take a whole crap load of work and time and energy. Like
Hmm.
we wanted to be able to have the
Hmm.
flexibility to show up in that way. And it's weird. Online is weird. I like no judgment, no bitterness. Like I'm so happy for people who can like have this perfect 1 hour morning routine, this fully optimized like life and diet and journal practice and like live keto and do all these amazing cool things. But here's the deal. We're not playing the same game. We're playing vastly different games. They're playing like high school tennis. I'm playing the Wimbledon over here. I'm trying to get 5 kids
Hmm.
out of the house in the morning when none of them can find their shoes.
Listen,
I take my kids
or want to wear the
shoeless
shoes that are there. Okay.
frequently.
Listen.
They leave them everywhere. Like, you know, we have elderly family members that are terminally ill. I've got family members that are struggling with mental health and addiction. And like, we have a community we're trying to support. Like, we got stuff going on here. whatever you can do it and do it the best you can. But like, don't be discouraged that you're not competing with someone who has no kids and no physical limitations and no mental limitations and no like family obligations, and they're playing high school tennis. Like, you're playing in the real world here. And yeah, they're rocking
Yes.
it. They're doing awesome, and that's great, but they're playing an easier game.
Way,
And so like,
way.
don't feel bad that you're not them. And don't feel like nothing is accessible for you. Like, if I can't do
Hmm.
it that way, I get nothing. Well, it's going to look a little different, and it might take a little longer, but we can be successful in whatever successful looks like for us.
Exactly. And that's it right there, like how you define success. And I just want to understand, like in this year, what did you do? Like, did you travel the world, or were you just like, I'm just doing everyday things and not having to go to work?
Uh, so, well, this year we did travel for 8 months.
Yay.
Spent a lot of time on the beach. We have a camper. My
Nice.
husband, because he's retired military, we get base access. We get to stay on military base campgrounds, which is a little bit more affordable. But also, man, the Marines, the Navy, the Coast Guard, they got some nice real estate. They got a
They
lot of
sure
beachfront real
do.
estate.
Especially in California, by the
Uh-huh.
way.
Yep, we spent 6 months in Southern California with tires on the
Yes.
sand. It was really nice.
Wow.
But it's like, there are some really cool things when you zoom out, but like, day to day, it's still life. Like, I'm still trying to feed children a dozen times a day, and like, of course, none of them eat the same things. And the thing
Never.
they like last week, they don't like this week. So like,
Never. You go to buy the Costco pack of the thing they say that they love, and they're over it by the time it hits the pantry. Okay.
yeah, my 7-year-old was like obsessed with instant oatmeal. It was like all he would eat for like months on end. And then one morning he was like, I hate that. And I was like, what are you talking about? You loved it. He was like, my taste buds were just confused. They thought they liked it, but they really didn't. I was like, child, what are you doing to me?
Oh, I'm sure my kids and your kids will get along great.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's a lot of real life stuff too. Sometimes if you zoom out, there's cool things and there's things I really appreciate. But when you zoom in, like, I was on a little chat and I was like, shit is real over here. Like, we are going through some stuff. I'm like, I feel like I can't air it all online. But like, behind the scenes, we're trying to figure some stuff out. The great thing with financial independence, though, is that we do have the resources and the time
Yes.
and the
Yes.
space. Like,
Yes.
people with addiction, people with mental health challenges, my kiddos with special needs and physical needs, and like all the stuff that's happening. I could handle such a difficult life in a way if we were also both working 60 hours a week. Like, that in my mind does not compute.
Right. Right. But it's just like, okay, well, it was a cart before the horse. I mean, did you have to figure that out before you accepted this lifestyle, or was it just kind of a product of the lifestyle?
I think you show up however much you can show up.
Yeah.
And if you're in that season of life where you're working 60 hours a week, you might not get to be that person who volunteers in your kid's kindergarten classroom. You might not get to be the sibling who helps your mom get to the doctor's appointment. You might not get to show up in all the ways that you want just yet. But there again, with mini retirements, like, you might be able to for 2 months, and you can kind of lean into those seasons of life when either we really want to be there or you're needed. I have a lot of clients, parents got really ill and they took 3 months off. And they had the financial wherewithal to take 3 months off and to be there and to really support like they wanted to be able to. And it's
Hmm.
okay it's okay if you're not awesome all the time. Like, I'm not awesome all the time. Sometimes my husband gets all 5 kids up in the morning and he gets them dressed and ready into school and he drops them all off and I lay in bed till 8 in the morning And then I wake up and I scroll Instagram for 20 minutes. Like some
That's it.
mornings, that's what I have to offer.
Yes. I really love it. But I just want like, as far as mini retirements for you and your clients, like, what does that look like? Because for me, I'm like, oh, I'm on maternity leave, which is
Yeah.
definitely a mini retirement for me because I have never taken this amount of time off in my life. I have had to go back to work at 6 weeks with my previous two
Mhm.
kids,
Yeah.
and I'm going on 4 months strong of not going to work. So this is a really long time for
Yeah.
me, but it's maternity leave, but it is also a mini retirement for me. I'm
Mhm.
claiming, but I'm also still doing work. I'm still
Mhm.
podcasting. I'm still doing my personal finance stuff, just not being a labor and delivery nurse right now, right? So that to me is enough to call a retirement. Does mini retirements to you look like shutting off all work, or are you doing some of the things that you were doing? You're just not counting on a full time like paycheck.
Oh, I never work full time. Like, let's be super clear about that.
Yeah.
That's not happening
Okay.
anymore.
Okay.
Um, so everyone has been different. Like sometimes we've stepped away from our
Mhm.
9 to 5, took a lot of them in between jobs, which can be
Mm.
super advantageous. Not only because it doesn't really disrupt, you don't have to do all that negotiating, but sometimes when you find the next job, pay bump is so significant that it covers all the cost of that mini retirement and it sets you up on like a lifetime trajectory of higher earning. So sometimes mini retirements like
Yes.
pay for themselves 10 times over by just be willing to
Mhm.
take that break, regroup, refocus, and come back strong. And now it's kind of weird with being self-employed. I took I called it like a year hiatus, and that 8-month trip was part of that because I
Mhm.
was just tired. Like it was the pandemic. We moved houses during that. We did a live-in renovation, and I wrote a book all at the
Ooh,
same
girl.
time. I know. It was like
PTSD.
I don't know how I thought all these things belonged together, but I did at the time. So after the book was published and I promoted and all that, I was like, yeah, I need first I thought I needed 3 months off, and at the end of 3 months, I was like, nope, not ready yet. Um, but because I'm a business, normally I would say before that I worked like 15, 20, 25 hours a week was probably like butt in chair, like actually focusing on something. And so during this hiatus, I said, you know what, 5 hours a week. That's what
Mm.
I have. Because there again, that's the amount that is all benefit and no downside for me.
Mhm.
That's the amount that
Mhm.
gives me an outlet, makes me feel creative, it gives me energy, and yet it doesn't cost me anything in my personal life because it fits in real nice. And so sometimes when you're self employed, a mini retirement isn't 100% you're off the grid. Sometimes it's 5 hours a week. Sometimes it's being available for a Friday meeting or being available for email for 20 minutes every day. Like you don't have to blow up what you built in order to take this time away. And even when I work with people on negotiations with their employer, sometimes there's like one sticking point. There's one that doesn't make it seem feasible for them to walk away. And if that one thing isn't a huge cost to you, it's okay to compromise on it. Like I
Yeah.
had one client who was an accountant, bookkeeper person, and they could hire a temp to cover almost all of her work. The only thing a temp really couldn't do was end of month books. And that took her
Mm.
about 6 hours. And she was like, you know what? We're going to be traveling a lot. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff locally. It's summer. She went summer with her kids. She was like, I can come in. I can come in for 6 hours at the end of the month, one day. That doesn't deter or take away anything from my mini retirement. If that's my compromise, like, cool, sign me up. That's totally fine. And so it'll look different. There are times when I totally checked out and was off the grid, but you don't have to be. Like, I say a mini retirement, my personal definition is anytime you take a month or longer away from your traditional employment to focus on something that matters to you. And
I
so
love
this
it.
in a mini retirement, you might start a side business. You might explore a hobby. One summer, I totally landscaped my backyard. If you would have looked at my time and budget, you would
Nice.
have been like, that girl is a landscaper. Like, I had the
And that is
landscaper's
a
tan.
full-time job. If you
It
say you ain't had a
was
full-time job.
hard labor. Like,
Yes.
that was not a
100%.
beach, not a beach. But we've taken these mini retirements to buy rental properties, to renovate properties. Like we've done things that had a financial cost, but we've also done things that like moved us ahead financially as well. And for some people, renovating a property might not sound like the mini retirement you need right now. Like you're like, I need the beach one, the renovation one. But sometimes it's about finding that balance. Like one of our month-long renovations, my husband took a month off of work. He was working like this really stressful job. He was doing case management for kids in a group home with like severe needs and, negotiating with birth parents and social workers and therapists and management people. And it all felt urgent. It all felt life or death. It was constantly changing and evolving. Like it was constant chaos. So to like paint a wall that just stays painted for a day was like a mental and emotional vacation from the high stakes work that
Hmm.
he was doing. And like, and a year later, we'd come back and he's like, oh my gosh, it's still there. The paint is still there. It hasn't blown up when I like left for a day.
Yes. So it's just like creating these differentiations in my mind of like mini retirements and, working. But it seems like the lines are still kind of blurred because it doesn't necessarily mean that you and your husband are off at the same amount of time. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing no work, or when you're working, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're working full time. Like, it's really about living life by design
Yeah.
because you're at that place financially where you have the option to, right? Like money just means options, right?
Yeah.
And so you're able to define a life you don't have to retire from. And so it's incredible because I think it's easy for people to think in like black and white, like either you're working or you're retired, but it's not. It's all gray and it's
No.
all good because these are things that you are doing with intention. So I really love it, but it also makes it more tangible because I feel like when people are like, okay, well, I have to get to this certain point and then I can do X, Y, and Z. But you were like, no, you can get here, come in one day a week,
Yeah.
and still meet those things, still do the things that you are aspiring to do personally that make you feel good. And so I think it frees up a lot of people from feeling like they're in this rat race. And that's the thing that a lot of people are escaping. Like when they're saying they're trying to escape the 9 to 5, or they're looking towards entrepreneurship for a way, or they're setting themselves for either like people in the fire community, like this early retirement thing. They're like, I'm just tired of trading for money and I just don't want to do that. Well, it just brings the ship a lot closer to shore. And like, no, listen, like, you can start those things that you hate doing, still do those things that you are doing that do help supplement them, but your life is just so much more fulfilled. And so I just love this conversation because it just opens up a world of possibility, even for me. But I know a lot of people are just like, oh, okay, like that's doable. I could do that sooner than I think. I could even probably do it tomorrow if I wanted to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And a lot of people need to do it tomorrow. Like the burnout is
yes, a
so
100%.
prevalent, especially in the US and especially a couple years post pandemic. A lot of people still haven't fully recovered. We're still tired. And it's funny because I kind of started in the financial independence content space, the fire space. But what was always odd for me is that you save this money with an intention of freedom, of choices, of security, of options, of living your values. And yet it's that same amount of money that then dictates you don't get to do any of those things. That same amount
Isn't
of
that
money,
crazy? Yeah.
you saved $100,000 to give you freedom and options and choices. And then that $100,000 says, I'm not enough. You get no choices. You get no freedom.
Mhm.
You get no
Mhm.
options because
Mhm.
I'm the one who gets to dictate your life now. My little spreadsheet gets to rule over what you can and can't do. I'm like, as long as you're spending things with the intention you gave it,
Yep.
if you said, I want to save this money and I want to be in a better financial spot, to have more time with my family, to have more time with my kids. If that was the intention you put that money in there for, let that money do the job. that you gave it to do. Let it fulfill its life's mission, because its job wasn't to hold you, to say, actually, you're not far enough along. You don't get to have any of the things that are important to you. It's just like a really weird framework for me.
I just think it's conditioning, right? It's like, even though we could set off on this path to fire, we're still in like this capitalistic system that is just like work, grind, like you're defined by what you do. And even now, like every day, somebody is like, when are you going back to work? I'm like, I don't know. I guess when I feel like it. You know, and like I kind of have to feel like it. But like for people, they can't, they're like, wait, you have to have like a date. I'm like, mm, not really. And before, I could never imagine that, right? And so it's just a mindset shift that we all kind of have to go through.
I think it's trusting yourself. Like
Yeah.
when you've given yourself these options and this freedom because you've made good financial choices, to say, I trust myself. I try to be able to know what I'm thinking and feeling, and I'll know when it
Hmm.
feels right. I'll know when my body's ready. I'll know when my energy's ready. But
Hmm.
so much of the world says, don't trust yourself. Trust us. Like, we'll figure it out for you. And I'm like, actually, I don't know if you can. Oh, that's cute that you
Where
think you
were
can.
they? Where were they when I was having this emotional breakdown? Like, where were they when my baby was screaming in the middle of the night? I don't have it. I'm not getting any sleep. And so my brain is not functioning properly. No, I don't think so. I can't. But yes, a lot of people, that's just how society is set up. It's kind of, how we were raised, and we have to shift those things. But I want you to share with the audience like how you work with your clients, what kind of services you provide, and want to talk about your podcast and how people can get in contact with you.
You know, so my coaching work is interesting in that, like, I'm not a traditional financial planner. I don't have, okay, here's the 8 money steps you have to go through, and we'll look at your insurance and we'll look at your mutual funds. And like, I don't do any of that. My goal is for you to get to your ideal lifestyle as close as we can get, quickly as we can get there.
Like,
So it's looking at, where do you want to go? What's actually really important to you? And that's like all of the pre-onboarding homework. And we show up and we say, okay, what's the challenge? Like, what things are you being awesome? Usually, if there's 10 things we need, they're awesome at like 7 of them. But there's these 1 or 2 missing pieces. So we focus all of our time on like, well, what's the challenge? And what are small steps you can start taking to make progress, to gain some momentum? Because usually people are just stuck. It's not that they're not making great progress, is that they can't decide between one thing or another, or they're not sure. And so they're not moving at all in this one area.
mm-hmm.
So figuring out, well, what's causing that? And how do we start steps to move out of that? And it's so cool because with a little bit of accountability, a little bit of a plan, with like some clear action steps, people make progress. Like, you just make progress. And it's not even so much about what we accomplish in this time frame, but people come back to me a year, 2 years, 5 years later and say, this started a whole new trajectory for me. And now
Yep.
I'm in an entirely different place than I ever thought I could be, because we shifted that angle.
Yep.
And so it's fun for me. It's really enjoyable to like get to witness this unfold in front of me. And then my podcast is mini retirement stories. It's just people who are planning one, who are in the middle of one, who finished one, people who've done multiple mini retirements, and like, what was the motivation? What were the logistics? How did you negotiate this time off? How did you save this money? How much did this cost? Where did you go? What did you do? Like, how was it transformational? Where did you end up now because you took that mini retirement 8 years ago? And so I tried to find a really diverse collection of stories, people of all different age groups, in all different parts of their financial journeys, people from all over the world, different cultural expectations, different kind of money mindsets, different professions, and show people how it could be possible. Because it's easy for me. I know a lot of mini retirement stories. Like, I've heard
Yeah.
hundreds of them. And so when someone says, I would like to do one, but here's why I can't. In my mind, I'm like, okay, so I know like 12 people that were in that exact same situation. I
And
know how they worked through
yeah,
that. So it seems super possible. So I'm hoping to kind of curate all of these stories so they'll see how someone else in their situation figured it out.
I love that. I'm like so intrigued by those stories. We're sold this bill of goods. That's not necessarily true. And until we surround ourselves with people who think differently or have done things differently, we can't imagine it for ourselves. And so, yes, I'm looking forward to hearing all of those stories. So I'll definitely be checking out the podcast. But how can people access your coaching services and the podcast?
Yeah, if you go to retireoften.com, all of my information's there. And I have, if you do slash mini, I have like a mini retirement kind of how you could map out to do one every decade, just like what are all the basic finances.
Nice.
Or if you go slash intentional, I have a free 10-day course that has like a little video and worksheet every
Ooh.
day that's like just like that life planning stuff, like helping you sort out, actually, yeah, this is really important, or I do need to focus on this more, or in this season, like here's what my priority should be. Um, and usually once you have that kind of clarity, the next step makes more sense and you feel a little bit more confident to take that next step.
And I think that's what it is all about, right? Just kind of getting out of that fog and taking that first step.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and then a whole new world opens up to you.
Yeah.
So I love that you have those practical tools that people can use, and I'll definitely link them in the show notes. I've had such an amazing time talking to you. I just, like I said, I'm fascinated by you, and now I know people can see why for themselves. But make sure you stay connected with Jillian. She has some amazing resources, sharing amazing stories, and Jess is overall an amazing person. So thank you so much, Jillian, for your time.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.